Joining me now on the show, he is the official Fox Sports 910 legal expert, Byron Browne, Big B of the Browne Law Group, the anti-lawyer lawyer, joining us via the Sanderson Ford hotline. And before we get legal advice, Byron Browne is throwing out the first pitch before the Diamondbacks game tonight at Chase Field. Are you ready? Are you willing to essentially put the fate of your entire legal practice on the line with sports listeners by throwing out the first pitch tonight, Byron?
Hey, that's some lofty goals you're setting there, Jody. But yeah, no, I feel good about it. I think it's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking once I get onto the field itself. But I've been practicing, and I feel like I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm going to have fun and enjoy the moment.
You can see some of his build-up to the first pitch if you follow Browne Law Group on any of the social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, etc. But we've talked before. You're obviously a big hockey guy. You had grown up in Canada. Would you be more comfortable throwing out a first pitch or like a slap shot to the goalie? Like, what would be more comfortable for you?
Oh, man, 100%. Getting on the ice and,
wow,
going down and taking a shot or standing at center ice, and shooting at the net in one of those contests. Easily I'd be more comfortable. I wouldn't even sweat it. But this, I stopped playing baseball around middle school and on from there, played softball and football and stuff with the boys. But, hockey is just embedded in my DNA.
If you do misfire on the first pitch, what nobody wants to see, but if you end up like drilling a spectator, the good news is you can just walk over and hand them your business card, and you basically just created some business for yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's talk some legal issues from around the world of sports as we do each week with our official Fox Sports 910 legal expert, Byron Browne. Let's start with the Cardinals. Steve Keim pled guilty to an extreme DUI. Shortly after that, a tight end on the team, Ricci Seals-Jones, was arrested in downtown Scottsdale. He was denied entrance to the W Scottsdale to use a bathroom. He was charged with assault, disorderly conduct, and third-degree criminal trespassing. Who knows exactly what happened, but is it common or does it happen where charges kind of get trumped up a little bit, and then when the dust settles, is he going to get a slap on the wrist? Like, how did you interpret this sort of list of charges against Ricci Seals-Jones?
Yeah, it definitely seems excessive from the facts known and that you read in the newspaper, but it's pretty typical of the police is, they don't want to add charges later and make it look like they failed to investigate X and Y. So right from the get-go, they're going to charge them with absolutely the worst of everything that they can. Because they call them lesser included offenses. So if they, if it's a numbered system and 10's the worst, they're going to go to a 10 and they're going to dial it back. And I think in this specific set of circumstances, you're likely going to see the charges dropped entirely, or that he pay a fine, little slap on the wrist and let him go.
Now, what this led to, it was a difficult few days for the Cardinals organization, obviously, with the GM getting in such high-profile trouble. And Ricci Seals-Jones isn't a star, but obviously he's a member of the Cardinals and a guy that they expect to be a fairly big producer this year. Some people look at this and say, wow, this Cardinals organization they're really struggling with some of these legal cases, and maybe the perception of the franchise is now in jeopardy, where people looking at the Cardinals and viewing it as a team that is permissive of so many individuals who run afoul of the law. If the Cardinals came to you and asked for some legal advice, like, hey, what's the best way for us to handle this? Would you advise, like, they put a rule in their franchise rule book that says any individual associated with a team that gets charged with X felony, X misdemeanor gets fired or cut immediately? Or would you advise, as we see typically, a case-by-case basis and just hope that everyone in the organization kind of shapes up?
Yeah, I wouldn't. There's always this line where legal advice to a business and then the business itself intersect. And I don't think it'd be right to advise a team to do a hard and fast rule, because it would hurt business at some point. Like if your star player is the whole reason you make it to the Super Bowl, and then the day before the Super Bowl, they get hit with a DUI, and the rule book says that you got to kick them out. There'd be so much backlash from the fans, and on a business standpoint, that I don't think the Cardinals, or any business for that matter, would want that. I think the more practical advice to give the team in that particular set of circumstances would be that they need to do something, and they need to do something more than what they've done in the past to set some sort of bar and then have that as a precedent, something that everybody can look back to and go, okay, listen, we know if we do X, Y is going to happen. I just think right now, they have been hit with a couple circumstances that I'm sure they don't want to deal with, and I think that they have to do something more than they have, or you're going to see the community at some point, especially if they're having a bad season. It'll be funny. If they have a good season, no one's going to talk anything about this stuff.
Right.
But, the more that goes wrong on the field and off the field, the more headaches they're going to have with it. And I think just from a moral standpoint as well, they need to start doing something to deter this behavior.
It's interesting you mentioned precedent because that was invoked after the Steve Keim DUI arrest. Michael Floyd was a wide receiver a few seasons ago who got an extreme DUI. He did get cut by the team shortly thereafter, and the team's position at the time was Michael Floyd was not truthful when he was asked about it from the team president and GM about what had happened. They had to learn the truth and the details through the media and the police department. And so when Steve Keim was arrested, some people immediately pointed to precedent of Michael Floyd, when really the precedent the Cardinals said is, don't lie to us when you get in trouble. It wasn't if you get in trouble, you're getting cut. It was don't lie to us. But legally and in the world of sports, it seems like precedent is a big deal, right? I mean, following precedent is important, setting a consistent standard.
Right, and that's why you see these businesses set cases apart from one another, because society as a whole, and I have clients who come to me and say this, they go, well, my friend was in this accident and got this amount of money. I mean, things in the legal community and in legal cases specifically, facts can turn a case on a dime very quickly. So the fact that someone isn't honest with their organization and doesn't give them all of the facts, now they're setting a precedent of, hey, if you lie to us, this is what's going to happen. And see, people might have that bleed into, well, he had an extreme DUI and he lied, so they're setting a precedent of, if you get an extreme DUI, you're going to be out. And the Cardinals, if they were approached with this particular scenario, or questioned, I should say, by the media, I think their response would be, well, listen, we were really upset with Floyd because he wasn't honest about it. He was passed out of the wheel. And they would start to distinguish his case from the Keim case and then say, listen, this is why they're different and this is why we treated them differently.
Byron Browne joining us here on The Drive, Fox Sports 910 Phoenix, discussing the latest of sports and the legal world intersecting. Speaking of precedent, the Miami Dolphins recently reignited the national anthem controversy when they made a team rule that essentially categorized any protest during the national anthem by a member of the team as conduct detrimental to the team and punishable by up to a 4-game suspension. This obviously caused quite an outcry. Is it because the precedent, what we just talked about, if the Dolphins set a precedent that kneeling and protesting is conduct detrimental to the team, allowing them to suspend a player for up to 4 games, that every other team would follow? And is that kind of why we saw the reaction we saw from players and media members around that rule the Dolphins made?
Yeah, but I think a little bit maybe more goes into it. Is I think the outrage is people think that that's what's actually going to happen. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I mean, there's always these policies and procedures legally that they got to follow through the CBA and other rules and regulations that apply to the relationship between the league, the teams, and the players. And so from I understand it, when the Dolphins, and every team has to do this, they have to submit their proposal to the league about how they're going to handle and or punish any players that kneel during the national anthem. And so Miami submitted theirs at the very highest possible punishments, because they can always dial it back. They can't dial it up. So much like the instance we just talked about with Jones, is they charged him with everything, knowing very well that they're going to dial everything back. And I think this is in the midst, again, put it all in context with, the league having conversations with the players' union about how to deal with this entirely ever since the players' union filed a grievance against the league as it relates to the whole policy in general. So I think what's going to happen with Miami is they're just doing what they have to do for now. I don't believe that they're going to stand by that at all. If anything, it'll get dialed way back. But what I think is going to be more likely is that before the season begins, the players, the teams, and the league are going to all have some sort of agreement on how to handle this particular issue.
Seems like you're probably right, as the NFL and NFLPA released a joint statement announcing a freeze, essentially, in the punishment protocol for national anthem controversies, hoping that, to your point, they can probably hammer something out that everybody universally agrees to, making it much easier for all parties to sort of digest. It's just a matter of, can they eventually see eye to eye on what's been one of the most divisive topics in sports over the last few years. Always excellent insight from his legal perspective. Byron Browne, the Browne Law Group, getbigb.com, the anti-lawyer lawyer. Byron, we'll always appreciate it, man. We'll look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Thanks, Jody.